The Dead Men's List. The Thompsons moved into their new house on a warm, sunny Saturday. The Victorian manor stood at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street, its towering structure casting long shadows on the lawn. Tom and Sarah had been looking for a fresh start after a tough year, and this house seemed perfect, a bit old and creaky, but full of charm. Their 12-year-old son Noah wasn't as thrilled, but he went along with it, mostly because the move promised more space and a massive backyard where he could play. As the movers left and the sun dipped behind the trees, they spent the evening settling in. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, but it felt like home. Sarah, as always, was quick to make the place cozy. Pictures were already hung, and the scent of dinner filled the air. Tom walked around inspecting the house, tapping on walls as if he were trying to understand its secrets. Noah, meanwhile, was distracted, his attention pulled toward the tall windows in the living room. When they sat down to eat, Noah kept glancing at the glass. His reflection in the window seemed to move oddly, almost like it wasn't quite in sync with his own actions. If he tilted his head, the reflection seemed to lag, only shifting a second later. He shook it off, thinking it was just a trick of the fading light. "Noah, are you okay?" Sarah asked, noticing his distracted look. "Yeah," he replied, pushing his food around his plate. "I just feel weird." Sarah smiled softly. "It's a big change, moving to a new house. It'll take time to get used to it." Tom nodded in agreement, though he seemed distracted too, his eyes darting toward the windows. These old houses always feel a bit strange at first. Give it a few days. Noah wasn't convinced, but he kept quiet. Later that night, as Noah lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house made strange noises, the kind of creaks and groans you might expect from an old building, but they felt different, like the house was settling in a way that didn't quite match his surroundings. His room was on the second floor, facing the backyard, and from his bed, he could see the large window at the far side of the room. He pulled the covers up to his chin and stared at the window. At first, everything seemed normal. The moonlight cast soft shadows across the lawn, and the tree branches swayed gently in the wind. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed it again. His reflection in the window wasn't matching his movements. Slowly, he sat up in bed, watching the reflection as he did so. But instead of rising with him, the reflection stayed still for a heartbeat longer, then followed suit. Noah's breath caught in his throat. He lifted his hand, and again, his reflection hesitated before mimicking the motion. He wanted to scream but couldn't. The words were stuck in his throat, fear gripping him tight. His reflection slowly smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes, while Noah sat frozen with terror. The next morning, Noah didn't mention what he saw. He wasn't sure if it was a nightmare or just his mind playing tricks on him. He spent the day in a daze, avoiding the windows whenever possible. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Every time he passed a mirror or a reflective surface, he caught the reflection lingering a bit too long, almost like it was studying him. That night, it happened again. Noah had convinced himself it was nothing, just the jitters of being in a new place. But as the hours crept by and the house settled into its nighttime silence, he couldn't sleep. The air felt heavy, and he could hear the wind outside rattling the old window frames. He tossed and turned until, once again, he caught sight of his reflection in the window at the far end of the room. This time, it was already staring back at him. Noah blinked, heart racing. He wasn't moving, but the reflection had turned its head, watching him with wide and blinking eyes. Slowly, it raised a hand, but Noah's arms were still buried under the blankets. He didn't know what to do. Was he going crazy? He squeezed his eyes shut, willing the image to disappear, but when he opened them again, the reflection was still there, smiling that same cold smile. Noah's breath came in shallow gasps. He flung himself out of bed and ran down the hall to his parents' room, nearly tripping over his feet in his panic. Bursting through the door, he stammered out what had happened, trying to explain the impossible. Tom and Sarah exchanged glances. "You're just having bad dreams?" "Noah," his father said, his voice calm but distant. "New house, new environment. It's all in your head." But Noah could see the doubt in their eyes, the hesitation. They didn't believe him, but they weren't completely sure he was wrong either. Over the next few days, the house began to feel more unsettling. It wasn't just Noah who noticed it now. Sarah swore she'd seen something out of the corner of her eye while brushing her teeth, a shadow moving in the mirror. Tom, always the skeptic, said the house was just old, full of drafts in weird angles. But even he couldn't explain the sensation of being watched. The reflections became bolder. Noah would catch glimpses of himself in the bathroom mirror, only to realize the reflection was turning away just as he stepped into view. His parents tried to keep it together, but the strangeness escalated. Sarah saw her own reflection standing still when she moved, watching her with eyes that weren't quite right. Tom found the reflection of their entire family at the dinner table once, even though he was the only one in the room.
As the days passed, the family's nerves were thin. The house felt hostile, like it was pushing them to the edge. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the house, Tom finally snapped. He marched through the halls, ripping down mirrors and covering windows, determined to put an end to it. But that night, when they turned off the lights, they realized it wasn't just the mirrors or windows. It was the house itself. The reflections were no longer confined to glass. They appeared on polished surfaces, even in the shimmer of water. They were everywhere, and they were getting closer. The family spent the night huddled together in the living room, unable to shake the feeling that something was watching them. Every now and then, they'd catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of their eyes, a flash of a hand in the dark, a faint smile and a shadow. By dawn, they decided to leave. But as they packed their bags, something terrifying happened. The reflections no longer mimicked them. They moved on their own, silently, their expressions twisted into eerie, knowing grins. One by one, the reflections stepped out from the surfaces they had once inhabited, standing beside their real-world counterparts, as if waiting for something. Noah, frozen in terror, could only watch as his reflection, now fully separated from the window, reached out, smiling that same cold, unsettling smile. And then it spoke. "You can't leave," it whispered, its voice sounding like his own but hollow. "This is our home now." The family fled the house, but the echoes of their reflections followed them, lingering in every shiny surface they came across, always watching, always waiting. They realized too late that some things, once forgotten, should stay that way.